Do you like your tea with your dose of daily news? Well, if you do, join me, Rolene Marks, right now on the Israel Brief, where Israel briefers from around the world gather every Monday to Thursday, where we take a look at those top stories making headlines right here in Israel. And we do it with the help of these guys, lay of the land. Now, I'm not sure I'm going to be joined today by my partner, the neighborhood dog. However, there is a good chance I might be joined by my very own cat. What can I tell you? News, tea, and a zoo. It's like dinner and a movie. Anyway, let's get started with those top stories. It is day 426 since the 7th of October. It is a reminder that there are 100 hostages held captive in Gaza. Why 100 and not 101? I'm going to get to that story in a moment. Also coming up on the show is your audience question, and it's kind of a follow-on from yesterday's question about Modi'in and, of course, the Mench and the moron of the week. So let's start with the top story, and the IDF has thrown some light on the circumstances surrounding the death of Israeli-born hostage Nadav Popowell and 5 other hostages earlier this year. So I'm going to read to you from the readout that comes from the IDF. It says, Popowell and the 5 others were killed during Israeli airstrikes in Khan Yunis on the 14th of February. The investigation determined that the hostages were likely executed by their Hamas captors in an apparent response to the IDF strikes, which targeted Hamas commanders and destroyed parts of the tunnel network where the hostages were being held. So what we can ascertain from this is that, again, in a group of 6, very similar to what we saw on the 1st of September when those we call the Beautiful Six were executed. These hostages were executed because the Israeli airstrikes were carried out very, very close to where they were being held captive. The hostages, Alex Danzig, 75, Yagev Buchstar, 35, Chaim Perry, 79, Yoram Metzger, 80, Avraham Munder, 78, and Nadav Popowell, 51, were abducted during Hamas's 7th of October 2023 attacks. The 6 captives had initially been held separately before being transferred to a concealed tunnel. IDF spokesperson Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari says, on February the 14th, the IDF struck an underground compound in the Qatari neighborhood in Khan Yunis. The attack targeted Hamas terrorists hiding in the area. At the time of the strike, the IDF had no intelligence indicating the presence of hostages in the vicinity, and the operation was conducted in accordance with established protocols. It is now understood that the strike occurred about 120 to 200 meters from where the hostages were being held. In August, the IDF entered the tunnel where they were killed, retrieved bodies, and started forensic investigations. It has concluded that there were 3 main possibilities regarding how they were killed. The most likely scenario is that following the strike, the terrorists murdered the hostages and were subsequently killed as a result of secondary effects of the strike, Hagari said. Another possibility is that the hostages were killed by secondary effects along with the terrorists and subsequently shot by other terrorists who arrived later. A less probable possibility is that the hostages were killed before the strike. It is absolutely untenable, the situation of our hostages. 426 days. President-elect Trump has tapped Adam Boehler as his envoy on hostage negotiations. We really hope that we see a miracle or something soon. Last night, it was cleared for publication that the body of hostage Itai Svirsky was recovered by the IDF in a very dangerous and complex operation and returned to Israel, where he was buried on Kibbutz Be'eri next to his parents that were killed on the 7th of October. His parents' names were Orit and Rafa. Itai Svirsky was 38 years old, and his grandparents had actually founded Kibbutz Be'eri. If you remember, Kibbutz Be'eri was one of the hardest hit kibbutzim during the terror attacks of the 7th of October. Now, Itai did not live on the kibbutz. He was visiting his parents when they were killed, and he was taken hostage by Hamas and held in captivity. I think that it brings a lot of closure for the family that they are able to lay him to rest. We did find out earlier in this year that he was murdered by Hamas along with Yossi Sharabi. Yossi's brother Eli Sharabi remains captive, and all indications are that he is still alive. Now, Noah Argamani, who was also held hostage and rescued in that incredible rescue operation, Operation Arnon, earlier this year, was kept for a short time with Itai and wrote how he was like an older brother to her and helped her through the dark times in captivity. Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Herzog, who knew Itai's parents, pay tribute to him. May his memory be for a blessing. I think all we want in Israel is for the remaining hostages that are still alive. It is believed that about 36 of them may still be alive, to be returned home so that the healing and recovery process can begin, and those that are no longer with us to be laid to rest. Amnesty International, no great friend of Israel, have released a report accusing Israel of genocide. Now, they base this report on what they call incitement and genocidal statements, and say that they base their report also on satellite images and the statements from residents. Now, what is very interesting to note is that nowhere in their report, where they have absolutely redefined the terminology of genocide, just like they redefined the terminology of apartheid in order to suit their narrative and their agenda. But the report is clear that they have not themselves been on the ground. Now, what is interesting is that Amnesty Israel have distanced themselves from the report, and they released a statement earlier today. So I'm going to read to you from Amnesty Israel's statement. They say that okay, let's go to the actual statement. They say that they accuse the authors of reaching a predetermined conclusion. They say that it was not involved, this is Amnesty Israel, in the research, funding or writing of the report released today, and that it does not accept the claim that genocide has been proven to be taking place in the Gaza Strip, and does not accept the operative findings of the report. Now, what is interesting is that the last time that Amnesty International released a report, also where they changed the definition of the accusation, in this case apartheid, Amnesty Israel distanced themselves from them that time as well. They said there have been allegations that both the massacre carried out by Hamas on October the 7th and the Israeli attack on Gaza following the massacre were genocide or attempted genocide. It is imperative and correct to investigate these allegations and to ensure that the standard required to prove intent to commit genocide is universal and consistent for all parties, as well as any other case in the world where similar concerns are raised. From the outset, the report was referred to in international correspondence as the genocide report, even when the research was in its initial stages. This is a strong indication of bias and also a factor that can cause additional bias. Imagine how difficult it is for a researcher to work for months on a report titled Genocide Report, and then to have to conclude that the only about crimes against humanity. Predetermined conclusions of this kind are not typical of other Amnesty International investigations. And there we have it. So if any of you are donating to Amnesty International, you can make your decisions based on that. And if anybody is active in the United States, I would call into question Amnesty International's protected charity status. And finally, Israel's National Security Association have issued travel warnings for the Maldives, Armenia, and Brazil, citing a security assessment that sees that there are significant threats to Israelis or Jews who might be traveling to these countries. Whew, what a broadcast. And it brings me to today's question, and it's a question that comes from Gary in New Zealand. Gary says, I loved hearing about Modi'in yesterday, Rolene. Can you tell us something else that's interesting about Modi'in? Okay, Gary, I'm very proud to tell you this one because these were numbers issued earlier this week, and Modi'in has the highest rate of reserve volunteers for the IDF in the country. There we go, something that we are extremely proud of. And finally, it is time for your Mench and your moron. So drum roll, please. Let's start with the Mench. Yesterday, we broadcast a story about President Peña of Paraguay, who will be in Israel next week as his country's embassy moves from Tel Aviv to our capital, Jerusalem. And he gets the vote for being the Mensch of the week, for having moral clarity and his unwavering support for Israel. And the moron of the week goes to the Oxford Debate Society. This is the Oxford Union who hosted a debate last week titled, and I will tell you what it was titled now. It was titled, Naming Israel a Genocidal Apartheid State. Now, on the side of Team Israel was the brilliant Natasha Hausdorff, who I had the privilege of seeing in conversation with Douglas Murray last night, Jonathan Sakadotti, and Youssef Haddad and Mossab Hassan Youssef. Now, the last two names are Arabs. In fact, Mossab Hassan Youssef was the son of one of the founders of Hamas, and he's now one of the most vocal advocates for Israel. You should really check him out. He's phenomenal. They were subject to the most horrific abuse. Images or photos of the Arab hostages were trampled on. Mossab and Youssef were called traitors and collaborators and sworn at in Arabic. And eventually, Youssef Haddad was kicked out of the debate. An absolute disgrace and a shame. And I just want to thank Johnny Simpson. You made this recommendation for Moron of the Week. And I think that this is a perfect example of utter repugnant behavior that needs to be called out. And I thank you very much for calling it out. And that's it from me for the week. Don't forget to join me on Monday for your top stories making headlines in Israel. I have a lot going on here at the moment, a lot of statements surrounding me. But in the meantime, I want to wish you a wonderful weekend. Shabbat Shalom. Take care of yourselves, take care of each other. Don't forget to check us out on our website at www.layoftheland.online, our Facebook page at Glottal's site, our YouTube channel at The Israel Brief. I'm on LinkedIn at Rolene Marks, on Instagram at Rolene.Marks. Rolene_Marks. I managed to get through this without a dog, without a cat, and my tea's still warm. So guys, cheers for now. See you Monday. God bless.